Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Rotor Talk Live, Season 3, Episode 25. Very special guest, Brendan Schulman from DJI. Brendan is the Vice President of Policy and Legal Affairs from DJI. Brendan, how are you this evening?
I'm great. Thank you. How are you?
Very good. We're real fortunate and very thankful that you're able to spend some time with us tonight. And we're just going to kind of get right into it. Now, I know there was an article that just came out today regarding data privacy, and I know Booz Allen Hamilton very well, a former friend of mine, well, not a former friend, but an ex-girlfriend of mine worked for them, and they did another independent study, and it shows that there was no data breach as far as DJI was concerned. Could you care to elaborate on that a little bit?
Sure, happy to. So as you and your viewers know, we've had many articles and accusations over the past weeks, months, years, however you count it, all to sort of the same allegation that somehow DJI drones are automatically sending your flight logs and photos or videos either to us at DJI and or the Chinese government. And so what Booz Allen Hamilton did on behalf of Precision Hawk was to look at 3 DJI models, the 2 government edition platforms, as well as the Mavic 2 Enterprise, and do a really close analysis of the security. And their conclusions, from my point of view, are entirely consistent with what we've been saying for years, as well as the probably 4 prior validations going all the way back to 2018. We had the Kivu audit back then. After that, we had the Department of the Interior program, DHS, which supported the Department of the Interior. And if you go back even further than that, there was a NOAA, the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Agency, did an analysis as well. And they all kind of say the same thing. In this case, confirming in the analysis, saying there's no evidence that data is sent to DJI or China or to other unexpected parties. So I think that's great news, although in some ways I think it's not news. It's just more of the same. There's never been evidence that we've seen that the drones are sending data when you don't want them to. And so I think that's further reason to be confident in our products. And, unfortunately, in this political climate, we've seen a lot of proposals that would nonetheless shut down federal government programs such as the Department of the Interior or even across the federal government, or that would actually prohibit you from using a drone with the Chinese component in it if you're the recipient of federal funding. And even in one draft executive order that was reported by Politico, prohibit you from flying over federally managed lands. So I guess that's the post office. If you are flying a drone that's made in China or has Chinese components. So the policies have gone sort of all the way to paranoia, if you will. And yet, when you have an analysis like this, particularly from a reputable firm like Booz Allen Hamilton, it just confirms what we've been saying for years, which is that you're in control of the data. You have a choice. There's no need to synchronize or to send us data. We have no business model that relies or turns on any of that stuff. So just don't do it, and go on and use the products productively, including fighting fires, saving lives, or just having fun.
Well, and I think you probably saw it, and it was, I can't say, it was probably within the last month or two. I know Romeo Dersher, who I've had on the show before, and I absolutely love having him on, and the work that he does is just, it's just out of this world. I can't say enough for what he does, and he's been a great personal friend to me as well. He pointed out, and quite accurately, that taking some of these drones away and taking them out of the picture is going to cost lives. And, Brendan, I don't know about you, but there's no price tag you can put on a life. I mean, if a Phantom 4 Pro, that's used by a police department, happens to spot somebody, or, one of the Mavic 2 Enterprise series spots somebody that's been lost, that's a life that's been saved. I mean, there's no price tag on that.
You're absolutely right. And I think our count is up to like 370 people who've been saved by drones from things like fires and floods, missing people, people who are mentally ill and wander away, including in many life-threatening scenarios. So absolutely, access to the technology is really important, and a policy proposal that just says, hey, this product is made here, so it can't be used, that's really not a smart approach. If we care about data security, just like when we care about risk and other things, or just like is true for other technologies, let's understand what the data security profile is, particularly in the kind of operation that you're doing. Is it sensitive? Is it not? In many cases, the operations are obviously not sensitive. You're monitoring a fire in a forest. I can't imagine why that's sensitive to anyone. And in many cases, the government operation is even publicly releasable. The information has to be made public. So let's look at the facts, really, rather than the political objectives of some people, and make sure that valuable life-saving equipment is not taken away. And again, if you think more broadly in terms of what's going on in the policy environment, maybe we'll get into this with other topics tonight. These policies place purported national security ahead of everything else, right? So there's if you think about it, there's something that is threatening about the aerial perspective, such that the government is proposing to take away certain people or certain agencies' ability to choose the products and to mitigate their own security issues. I mean, when you think about it that way, considering that anyone can buy a drone and fly it, what does that mean for the operators? If you're someone who wants to fly a drone, and drones are inherently a national security risk because they might be sending data somewhere, then what does that mean for your data? Because I don't think you've been security validated in any way. So I think ultimately, if the policies are driven only by security, and especially by improper understandings of security, we're all at risk, because then it's the case that no one with a drone can be trusted. Doesn't matter where the drone is made. We have to shrink the number of people flying drones and authorized pilots out there, because there's some kind of national security risk that is prompted when you have an aerial perspective of certain kinds of locations. I think that should be a great concern. And if you go back a few years, the FAA was supposed to, under the Section 2209 framework from the statute a few years ago, the FAA was supposed to have a process to designate certain locations as being restricted for drone operations. They have not done that. They're supposed to cover critical infrastructure and similar things. So look, I'm all for risk-based solutions. And if someone were to figure out where are the drones actually a threat, I'd be fully in support of limiting or otherwise filtering their operation. In fact, we do that with geofencing, but we're sort of guessing. Airports are obvious, other places are not, prisons. But we're trying to keep the drones away from things that might be sensitive. We have no interest in the products being used in any way that makes people uncomfortable. Most of the operations, as you pointed out, are not like that. They're life-saving, they're public safety missions, firefighting, and by far the benefits are well established by now. We have to make sure the policies don't get in the way.
Well, for us hobbyists, we look at it as a hobby. It's something that recreationally that we do and that we enjoy, photography and videography, and just, it kind of gives you, it's kind of like that, my dad was into golfing. Okay. And for me, it's evolved from, I had gas powered planes when I was younger, and now it's evolved into drones. And I absolutely love it. I love the technology. I love how DJI just increasingly just ups the ante each time. The Mavic Air 2, I could talk to you for hours about how much I like it. But, the thing is, and you pointed it out so well, and here for our instance, okay, why would somebody want to know about the dimensions of my lake in my behind my house, or when I flew down to the Bay Bridge here in Tampa? Why is somebody going to want to know that data? I mean, it's just absolutely, there is a need for national security, and that's to be understood. But you're looking under rocks here, and you're not finding things. This is, like you said, the fourth study that was done. Let's move on here. And I think one of the other things that I want to say is this. I know that the government apparently has contracted with Parrot to be able to do some things with them. Okay. Now, I know some of my drone people out there have the Anafi and they love the Anafi, but I'm going to say this, okay? That's not a solution for real time enterprise use. Okay, that's not a drone that's going to be equipped to do that. There are so many shortcomings as far as it being an enterprise type of level drone.
Well, look, my role has never been about promoting one product over another. The work that I've done for 5 years, and even before I was at DJI, was really to advocate for everyone to have the use of a drone in a way that's least burdensome and most reasonable with respect to the regulations. So really the work that I do benefits everyone. When it comes to things like remote ID or registration or flight over people or things we've done in terms of state and local legislation. I don't make advocacy into a matter of one product versus another. And on these issues, the security issues, the point is let the customers choose. So, let the Department of Defense support and buy an American drone. Makes sense to me. Obviously, they're going to have very high standards. DJI has not marketed or advertised its products for military use. Go ahead and buy what you want. But when you have policymakers who clearly don't understand the technology and haven't read the facts that have been put out in these validations, saying, no, you just can't use or buy the product just because of where it's made, that's when we're in trouble. And by the way, many American branded products also contain components made in China. In fact, the entire Department of Interior fleet is grounded, not just the DJI drones that only make up like 17%. So really the impact is devastating and broad. It goes well beyond one company versus another. I remember working with the folks at Parrot on things like registration and flight over people. More power to them if they have a product that competes in the marketplace. That's the way it should be.
Absolutely, I'm in agreement with that. The main topic that we really wanted to spend some time and focused on, because I know you were very passionate about it and you were very involved with it, is remote ID. And what I'd like to start off with tonight, Brendan, if you could kind of give us an encapsulated version of how the whole idea got started for remote ID, and then we'll kind of go from there.
Sure, it's a bit of a tale, but I think it's important to understand the backstory here. So it mostly starts in the fall of 2016 when Congress put into the FAA Extension Act. That's a bill that provided funding for the FAA. Each federal agency has to be reauthorized every few years, and the FAA bill was being negotiated for a number of years. But one extension version of that said, hey, FAA, go and figure out how to do remote identification using industry standards, figure out how to get that done. And then what happened, remember, 2016 is when Part 107 was finalized. The next step that FAA had on its schedule was, let's figure out flight over people and night operations, because those are excluded from Part 107. And we're all looking forward to that, in part because operations at night and over people are life-saving. So in early 2017, as FAA was getting ready to issue a notice of proposed rulemaking for flight over people, the federal security agencies, including FBI, DOJ, DHS, said, wait a second, we're now worried about national security, flight over crowds. If we don't know who's flying the drones in that way, we have a security issue that we can't resolve. We don't know whether that person is authorized or not. And of course, you can just look to the media environment. At that time, there were many scary stories about the threat of drones, either at airports or crowds or what have you. So that was early 2017, and the security agencies basically said to the FAA, you can't move forward with any expanded rulemaking for other ways of flying drones beyond Part 107 unless and until there's remote ID. So starting that year, the FAA got very serious about moving up the remote ID initiative, which had already been sort of on their list from Congress, to being the next thing they had to do. And so they stood up the Aviation Rulemaking Committee on Remote ID, that I'll call that the ARC, A-R-C. I was on that along with 70 or 72 other people representing various interests that we can talk about. But at that point, we all got together and spent really the whole summer, in some sense, meeting and trying to figure out for the FAA, how can you accomplish remote ID, mostly in a technical way? What are the technologies available? And also, what are some of the policy considerations? So really, and then from that report, which went to the FAA in the fall of 2017, we waited over 2 years for the FAA to get out its notice of proposed rulemaking, which is the FAA's proposal for how to get it done. And we can talk about how the ARC report differs from what the FAA put out and who was on the ARC and things like that if you want. But that's the backstory is there's an urgent and sort of overarching need articulated by federal security agencies that remote ID has to get done before anything else can happen in terms of UAS rulemaking. And so that's where we still are, although now we're finally in this period between the proposed rule and the finalization of the rule.
Back in January, DJI came out with an article called "We Strongly Support Drone Remote ID, but Not Like This," which you contributed to, and it was an excellent article. It talked about broadcast remote ID, and it leverages existing technology. And can you make our viewers just aware of what it is and what technology this leverages that's already there?
Yeah, sure. So given the story I just related about how important remote ID is to the federal government, and by the way, the same types of needs are also present in Europe and elsewhere. So really, drone remote ID is going to happen. And you could see that in late 2016, or at least by early to mid 2017. So, and there are good reasons for it. It does make sense to have accountability, like a license plate on your car, right? So remote ID makes a lot of sense. But my personal perspective, as well as DJI's, has been, let's get it done, but in a way that accomplishes two things. Respect the privacy of the drone operators, because where they operate and who they are is personal information, and in some cases it can be business sensitive information, or it could just be information about a young student flying in the backyard. And number two, let's make sure that the solution is not overly costly. You know, if we can do this in a way that's efficient or even free and easy, just like you stick the license plate on your car, you know, after you buy it, and you never think about the license plate again. Maybe you got to put the windshield sticker on, which is an inspection issue, not so much a registration issue. But basically, your license plate is done once you put the plate on your car after you buy your car. So can we make remote ID like that, easy and cheap or free? And that's really the approach we took in the ARC, as well as in developing our own solution called Aeroscope, is let's use existing technology so that ultimately you, the users of the technology, aren't faced with unnecessary costs and hassles, as well as an invasion of privacy that might come if you were to require all the drones to be networked to one system that's collecting all the flight information. So what we wrote in the Viewpoints blog post that you're mentioning is really our reaction to the FAA proposal in light of the discussions that we had at the ARC, including the report that recommended either broadcast or network. And what is this broadcast network? Well, broadcast is just a radio signal transmission out from the drone, which should be pretty familiar to you. It's just like what's already there in terms of watching the video downlink. That is a signal that's being sent from the drone over radio to your remote controller, versus network, which was sort of the method that was advocated by various parties at the ARC, which would require each drone first to connect to the internet and feed the ID information through the internet to some kind of network system, which then ultimately provides it to the law enforcement officer or whoever on the ground needs it. So from our perspective, let's do this the simplest and most direct and easiest way, which is just broadcast your license plate type of information to whoever's nearby who might be impacted by the flight of the drone, rather than connecting the drone to a whole network infrastructure in order to accomplish the same thing in a very circuitous way, with a lot of costs and steps and hassle that would be imposed on the users. So DJI's perspective, we understand remote ID is important. It's got to get done, and we are supportive of it. But we can't support a solution that is more burdensome or more invasive than it needs to be. And that was our reaction to the FAA proposal on the first read, especially, which is what you're referring to, is that blog post that I think went up just a couple weeks after the NPRM came out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and one of the things, there's a couple of things that I know I've been getting a lot of comments about whenever we've been talking about remote ID. One of them is, the ARC proposal is something, and this is something I've been in IT my whole career, Brendan, for 30 years. And whenever a system is designed, okay, it's what they call architected out, and then they put it through some simulations because our VPs and above, they want to see that this is going to work before they commit to spending, hundreds of thousands of dollars to build a new system. Okay. And correct me if I'm wrong, but what the ARC proposed was never actually, it was just on paper. And what the DJI solution, if I'm not mistaken, there was an actual demo of it up in Montreal.
Yeah, that's right. So the ARC was sort of just people talking about different ideas, but we very quickly reduced one of those ideas to practice, namely the broadcast method. Now we did that using the technology we had available, which was the existing protocols on our drones, understanding that at some point, just like any other IT industry type of solution, you need to standardize it so that anyone can create the transmitter and the receiver. So that process took place at ASTM International, which is a standards defining body. And what they did, and it was FAA and other industry companies, is to define the broadcast method as basically Bluetooth or Wi-Fi. So the solution, if you will, to broadcast is something that already exists. It leverages Wi-Fi and Bluetooth protocols to simply provide the remote ID information on a protocol that's already accessible by the smartphone that's in your pocket. And that's sort of one of the goals that the FAA articulated is remote ID is not just for security officials, it's for the public. The public at some level needs to be able to pull out their phone and read the ID number, and then if necessary, report that drone to the authorities when the authorities aren't there. So that means you got to get the information to something that you're holding already. We all have smartphones. There's two ways to get stuff to a smartphone. One is to send it by Wi-Fi or broadcast. Is it Wi-Fi or Bluetooth broadcast? Those of you who have an iPhone know AirDrop is sort of like that. Like you can AirDrop in the absence of internet. It's a direct transmission. So is broadcast remote ID. You don't need the internet. The other way to get information to a cell phone or another connected device is through the internet, which means that both the receiver and the sender need to be connected to it. And that, that's the other way to do it, is to send the information, probably over the cell phone system, or possibly over a Wi-Fi connected to the internet, and to get that information onto your phone. So this sort of technology path really developed between the ARC and the FAA proposal. Now, what the FAA proposal says is do it both ways. Our proposal, the FAA says, our proposal is broadcast and connect via the internet, including paying an anticipated monthly subscription fee to the remote ID service providers, just to get the information to the same point, which is the official or the member of the public who wants to know who's flying or other identifiable information relating to the drone operator.
Well, it's a given. Anything above having like the Mavic Mini, there's a registration fee for us, okay? And if you want to pursue your Part 107, that runs $150, and that's every 2 years you have to go up that. And those are givens, and those are, I think, just very well accepted in the drone community. And you count the cost when you decide to get into this hobby. besides the hardware and the equipment, you have to do things like the registration and so forth. And that's a given. But, one of the other things that people have said was, you know what, I've paid, I should be able to go up and fly to my heart's content without having to worry about pay a fee to somebody, say like AirMap or Kitty Hawk or another service provider, just to do this when like you've mentioned, the technology is already there, that they don't need to be involved with something like this.
Yeah, and that's what we would like to see, because we want to solve the problem, but we don't want to interfere in the beneficial operations. And to go back to your prior question, so look, Wi-Fi and Bluetooth exist, and we did that demo in Montreal. Aeroscope, you could say, going back over 2 years, was a demo of broadcast working in the real world, and it has solved problems at airports and security events and facilities. But the standard is Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, and so in November in Montreal, we showed that the Wi-Fi broadcast also works in an urban environment right to your phone, sort of a drone to phone type of concept. The network solution that's in the FAA proposal has never been tested in the real world. I don't even know that it's been prototyped. There's sort of an assumption that if you connect all these pieces through the internet, you can provide the data at a sufficiently low latency to solve the remote ID need. But that hasn't been established. And in fact, there are companies right now that have been tapped to develop that. But sort of that's after the proposal already says we're going to have to do it. So it is kind of curious that the rule says this is the way you're going to have to do it in the absence of evidence that it can be done that way. And one of our comments in our NPRM filing, it was just that. How can we depend? And by the way, the FAA is requiring the motors to be kept off until the remote ID system online is confirmed to be working. So it's almost like an interlock, meaning that if something goes wrong, if there's a lag in the internet or the remote ID service isn't reachable, or there's a cybersecurity attack, speaking of cybersecurity, none of the drones in the country can take off because no one can reach the remote ID provider, even though they have access to the internet. So we said in our comment, how can you do that? That's creating almost like a single point of failure for something that might be a life-saving operation. So there are all kinds of reasons to be concerned about the FAA proposal. We wrote 80 plus pages on that, explaining why, including an analysis of costs. But you're right, the bottom line here is that, look, remote ID is coming, it's important. I think it actually will provide a lot of solutions to many different policy challenges that we have. But it's got to be done the right way so that it's successful. If 50% of people flying drones hate it and don't want to do it because it costs too much and it interferes in their enjoyment or their business, then you're going to have a solution that fails. And ultimately, that goes back to the original security requirement that the drones be identified. If you can only identify half of them, then you don't have a solution at all. And now you have half the people doing remote ID, half of them not, and therefore 1 out of 2 drones that comes across the stadium, has to be shot down or is potentially a rogue drone. The point of remote ID is to eliminate the friendlies and focus on the drones that are actually a threat in a security scenario, and that becomes a goal that can't be accomplished if remote ID is not successful. And so our advocacy, including in that blog piece, is we need remote ID to be successful so that people can continue to use and enjoy drones and society is comfortable with them. And that's why we have to do it in a way that's low cost and reasonable to the end users.
I have a friend who lives out in Idaho, and he flies in Class G airspace all the time. Okay. In fact, he lives by the Snake River Canyon where Evel Knievel did his jump out there. And a lot of times when he gets out there, he has no cell phone service. There's no carrier out there. So he said for him, his best flying location would be moot. He wouldn't be able to fly out there with something like that. And, and I know there are several other ones here who live near Class G airspace, and it would be the same for them. I mean, they just would have to not be able to fly there anymore.
So actually, that is, in all of this, there's this misconception about what the proposal is. And I'm not sure where this started, but it seems to persist, including in many comments that I read that were filed with the FAA. The proposal does not say that you need to be connected to the internet. What it says is if the internet is available, then you must be connected to the internet.
Okay.
Now, there's a whole theoretical discussion, especially if you're in IT, that we could have about what it means to have availability of the internet. In theory, if you have a satellite phone, you can reach the internet from the moon, or so. And that was a section of our comments saying you can't have availability of the internet be a trigger for a regulatory requirement. But that is what the proposal says. If you have
I think Brendan probably hit the wrong button there. We'll hang on a second here. Yeah, Brendan was talking about, we had just, we found out, that an internet connection really, quote unquote, technically isn't needed. And that's what he was discussing, the latest of here. So I think he probably accidentally hit mute, but as soon as we get him back, we'll get him back here. He's bringing up a lot of good points as far as remote ID is concerned. And, DJI solution, DJI wants this to work. Okay. And in order for this to work, he brought up a good point. Welcome back.
Maybe it was ironic that happened during my
that discussion. Yeah, that the timing of that is absolutely incredible. Go ahead, continue.
Yeah, so I'm sorry about that. Actually, my laptop timed out. I need to change the power save feature, but so that was not an internet failure. That was a laptop timeout failure. So what the proposal says, like, if you can reach the internet, then you have to connect to it and do this remote ID service. But if you're in a place that doesn't have internet, like the places you're describing, then you can do the broadcast instead. Okay. Now, I still think there's going to be edge cases that are a problem. Like, what if you barely have connectivity to the tower enough to sort of have the internet there, but data is not really going through? Now you've got a remote ID system failure, it seems, and FAA's proposal says the drone has to stop itself from taking off in a situation where internet is available, but the remote ID service is not working. So there's still a problem in places you're describing where you're sort of on the edge of connectivity. And that's certainly a major concern. But I do want to dispel this sort of myth that's come up in the comment process that if you're in a place with no internet connectivity that you're grounded. That's actually not what the proposal says.
Okay. Thank you for clearing that up tonight. And I know I looked over DJI's comment, if you will, and a 98-page comment, and I read about five to 10 pages of it, and it was well laid out, well organized, well done. And I know, a lot of other drone reviewers, like myself, we put some very thoughtful comments out there. I know, and of course, there were a number of rogue comments out there that weren't really, using probably profanity and so forth, that really just needed to be ignored. But I think one of the takeaways that I got was, when we heard the news, just recently about them going forward with this, was it felt like to a lot of my subscribers, a lot of viewers, like kind of like a slap in the face from the FAA. We're going to take all your comments, but we're basically going to ignore them,
Well, I hope they don't. In the Part 107 comment process, they did take some of the comments and made changes. For example, the original limit was 400 feet above ground level. That changed to 400 feet above a structure. Mm-hmm. Originally, package delivery was prohibited, and the final result was package delivery is permitted within visual line of sight. So they're supposed to take thoughtful and constructive comments into account, and I hope they do. I have heard that they've completed the entire review of the 53,000 comments, which is impressive. The Part 107, I think, had maybe 5,000 comments, and it took them, well, I'm not sure how long it took them to review those, but the entire process of finalizing the rule took about a year and a half. And here I've heard the FAA is aiming to get this out by the end of the year, which is, that would be about a year, which is aggressive for an agency to finish a rule, particularly when they get tens of thousands of comments. Now, a lot of those comments, I don't know how many are cut and paste, and those tend to just be treated as one comment if they're sort of originating from a trade group or some kind of advocacy type thing. So maybe to some extent that explains the speed. But look, we'll have to see. I think it's still possible to talk to FAA and make sure they've heard your concerns. At some point, you can talk to your members of Congress, who, especially if you have someone who in your district, representing your district, who sits on one of the oversight committees, the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee or the Senate Commerce Committee. That could be one route, is to tell Congress that you're concerned. Also, the FAA symposium is coming up. To the extent you plan to go to that, you can send your comments to the FAA. Even though that's a virtual symposium this year, I believe there's some ability to connect directly with FAA officials. But look, it's a democracy, right? Like the comments are supposed to be reflected in the outcome, and depending on which issue you care about, there would need to be some significant justification, I would think, for disregarding many thoughtful comments. I hope that's not the case.
Yeah, same as well here. Same here with me. I'm also a member of the AMA, the Academy of Model Aeronautics, and one of my side hobbies is RC planes, and I mean I've that's been kept dormant for a while. I don't have a YouTube channel on it, and I don't talk a lot about it. But what those folks do for this community is absolutely fantastic. I mean, some of the fields that where they do their flying are just manicured. They're perfect. I mean, it's like a community in and of itself, and it's very fantastic. And this proposal, is going to kind of like turn their world upside down, as far as flying there. Now they would have to be able to let drone pilots be able to fly in that, if they're in the within the airport zone. And I know, and I saw out there, and you had mentioned about cutting and pasting in comments. I know that they were encouraging their members to do that, and that was probably the worst thing in the world.
No, I don't think it's the worst thing in the world. In fact, I do think it's good to show that a lot of people care. But it's not the best thing in the world. What you want to do with a comment to an agency is tell your story and describe the impact that the proposal will have on you individually, particularly with data like, this is going to cost me twice as much, or I'm someone who builds old-fashioned model airplanes that aren't going to be able to connect to the internet, and I don't belong to AMA. There's no club anywhere in my area. So when the FAA estimates that it's, I forget what, like a 20-mile drive to the nearest field, that doesn't apply to me. My cost of flying in a place under this rule is going to be, $100 a month. Like that's data that tells your story, and the FAA is supposed to take into account. If it's just, this proposal is bad because, it ruins our fun, and you cut and paste that 30,000 times, okay, like that shows there's passion and engagement, but ultimately the FAA is probably not going to act on something that's that generic. So it really depends what you say and how you say it, and particularly if you have specific stories. And in our materials that we put out in terms of tips on commenting, we said tell your story. Like, get out there and you're an educator at a school who's got classes of students who want to learn about drones or aviation, and this is now going to be a burden somehow. That's the kind of, I've seen comments like that just in the system when I was looking at them a couple months ago, and I like to think that some of that's going to make a difference.
I agree with you. I really hope that they do, and I hope they take heed of that. And One of the other comments that has come across my way a lot is, a number of people have said, "Oh, well, the FAA is doing this to clear it for Amazon and UPS and other drone delivery companies." And one of the things that I've come in real quickly and said is, "Look, okay, that technology, I don't think we're there yet as far as, next thing you know, my Amazon Prime delivery is going to be dropped off by a drone in front of my house." I don't think we're at that point or even close to it as far as the technology is concerned.
Well, it's nice to see some progress, particularly in the current pandemic situation on drone deliveries. I tend to share your view that there's still a number of steps left to get that going at scale, and most of the projects tend to be pilot programs or research. But I'm not sure I agree entirely with the premise that this proposal is a matter of clearing the skies. I think it's a couple of things. First, of course, companies that only care about delivery are going to be focused on that. And remember what I said at the beginning, that nothing else gets done for them unless there's remote ID. Why? Because the security agency said so. So if you're a company that wants to do things that you can't do today at scale, and remote ID is standing in your way, and you expect to be part of remote ID and traffic management anyway, so this is just no big deal, then of course you just want to move forward and don't care much about other UAS users, because it's just not something you would care about, and that's kind of understandable. But that's different from, this is being driven by companies like that. I do think it's more accurate to say that the security community is driving this in a way that is arguably unreasonable. And it kind of ties back to the beginning of our discussion tonight. When I said, security outcomes are driving a lot of drone policy, here you go. So the desire to have broadcast and network is probably more driven by a sort of a desire by security stakeholders to know it all and have it available everywhere, much like a license plate tracking database would provide lots of interesting information if you were a security official. But at some point, there needs to be a balance between security interests and civil rights, civil liberties, just the interest of technology, what's reasonable cost, hassle. Government's supposed to balance competing interests. And clearly there's a competing interest between all-knowing security and freedom to operate and privacy, as well as cost. So someone's supposed to figure that out, namely the FAA. But I do think they've been under pressure for 3 years now to come up with remote ID in a way that satisfies security agencies. I think that's much more the case. And then you've got the industry companies who want to do other things beyond remote ID, and they don't care that much about the remote ID outcome, but they're being held up because of the security requirements. So they're happy to sort of give everything away, or let's just say yes and move on, in order to move forward with drone rulemaking and advanced operations. So I think that's maybe a more nuanced way of looking at what you're suggesting. It's more complicated than. And by the way, I should call out Wing, formerly Google, for being very supportive on the sort of the standards-based approach, the ARC recommendation of either or, trying to be reasonable, as well as protecting the innovation that comes from model aircraft and amateur hobbyist operations. If you read their comment, I think you'll see that even among the big players in the industry who want to do delivery, there are reasonable opinions and perspectives out there if you look for them.
I know a number of people have said they're hesitating in buying a new drone this year because of remote ID, because they're not sure what the changes will be. They're not sure if their Mavic 2 that they're going to buy tomorrow is going to be able to work, say, in January of 2021. And I tell everybody, one of the things that I think a lot of us, as far as drone content creators, like to emphasize is get the drone that's going to meet your needs right now. Okay. And I know DJI is having sales, and I know, like, the Mavic 2 Pro series, the Mavic 2 series, I know there's the Father's Day is coming up. I know there's going to be a sale on it. It's just these happen from now, every time, and you can get some great deals. And I can tell you from a content creator standpoint, the Mavic 2 Pro is just an exceptional drone for me, because it's done everything I've asked it to and then some. And then the creativity and the ingenuity that DJI, and I've always said this on my show, Brendan. I said, DJI never wastes technology. They're always a step ahead. They're always wanting to keep moving up above, and I think that's fantastic. But what do you say to people who are saying, well, I just kind of, remote ID, I want to wait till next year? What do you say to people like that?
I don't think it makes any sense to make purchase decisions now on the basis of remote ID for a few reasons. If you look at the FAA proposal, first of all, they're working to finalize it by the end of the year, but I don't know that they'll be able to accomplish that. That's aggressive. So it could be that there's at least a year before we see what the final rule is. And then, as proposed, there was a 3-year implementation period. It's not like overnight your drones have to comply. Also, many of us are hopeful and put into our comments that there should be retrofit options. Particularly if you can do a broadcast, it would be pretty easy to stick on a broadcast transmitter to comply with remote ID, and I hope that is permitted across all technologies, so that no one across any brand would need to throw out their equipment, which would just be an environmental problem as well as a waste of money. From our perspective on our products, we very much want our drones to be updatable, to be able to issue a software update that will allow them to comply. Now, I can't make promises because we don't have the final requirements. There are technical issues. It depends on timing. Like, a product that we released 2 years ago probably won't get an update 2 years from now. So when do we have to do it? Depends on a lot of things. But when you think about it, that's like maybe a 3 or 4 year window of use. So ideally, the reason Bluetooth and Wi-Fi are a part of the ASTM standard for this is that those antennas exist on many current products, not just ours. Most drones out there, I think you referred to Parrot, for example, are using some variant of Wi-Fi. So if you can use that existing technology to do the broadcast, you're done. Also, a lot of drones have ground control stations that are connected to the internet, at least some of the time. So that could be a potential retrofit, a path that's done through a software update on the app as well as the drone to make sure the telemetry is right and all that. So there are a number of different upgrade paths that we hope are zero cost and are done with the software updates that we push out. But there's not enough certainty right now in terms of the standard and the FAA's approach, as well as the very important question of, do we need to certify that the product does remote ID? This was in our comment. If we have to certify it, then we probably can't do that after we sell the drone because it's under your control. We can apply the remote ID software when we have it, but once it's out in the market, how would we certify that the update has been performed and that it's operating, especially with the smartphone or tablet that you happen to be using, which we don't have any control over? So if the FAA makes us certify, we put this in the comments, if FAA makes us certify, I don't know how we do that for products that already exist. But I have a feeling like everyone recognizes that that's not going to solve remote ID if we can't address the probably millions of products that are out there in the world already. Then how long will it take for 90% of drones to have remote ID? A long time. So there's got to be a way to upgrade and retrofit one way or the other. And that's why I say, don't wait with a purchase, whether it's a DJI product or anything else. You're just sort of taking away your own fun or enjoyment or productivity, probably for the next 2 years at least, while you wait for the government to finish its work. And by the way, just look at other FAA initiatives. I think it's clear to me that waiting on the government to get something done is probably not a winning proposition. So it would make no sense to me, as an avid drone enthusiast going back to the mid-90s, or model aircraft for that matter, which I continue to buy and fly. I'm not stopping myself from buying something because of remote ID.
Well, and thank you for clarifying that, Brendan, because I know a lot of people have said, they're steadfast. They said, okay, if it's under $1,000, I'll buy it. If it's over 1,000, I'm going to wait on it. And and my whole take on it all along has been, if it's going to meet your needs, get it. Because, for example, I'll just point this out. You talked about adaptability and being able to retrofit. Well, with the Mavic 2 Enterprise series, there's the notch on the top of them, so you could be able to add the loudspeaker, the lights, the strobe. And obviously, DJI is so incredible. They'll come up with something. Parrot will come up with something. Autel will come up with. I mean, all the drone manufacturers will come up with something to make it easy to do something like that. So don't rob yourself of, if it's your profession, don't rob yourself of that. Don't, if it's a hobby for you, don't rob yourself of that joy, because some of the greatest pictures and video I've ever taken have been from 150 feet up in the air. I mean, and it's all about timing. That's what I say on the channel, and I really preach that. When you go out to fly, and trying to get that perfect picture, that perfect sunset, or the perfect video, it's all about timing. And that's one of the things for me that I absolutely positively enjoy, and it's something that I really like. Brendan, it's been great having you on the show. I really appreciate your time, because I know you're quite busy, and we want to thank you for all you do for DJI. I follow you on Twitter all the time. You put out some great tweets, and I'd encourage everybody to follow Brendan on Twitter. He's very active and very involved, and I really like that. And I also want to let you know, and I pass this on to a lot of people, as far as DJI support is concerned. And I tell them, one of the things that I tell them all the time is, I have had incredible, I'll say incredible, I won't call it luck, but response from DJI support whenever I've engaged them on Twitter. And I tell everybody, have your facts for whatever has happened, have a receipt or a bill, your bill of purchase. Have details to be able to give to them. If you need to have logs available. And I'll tell you what, Brendan, every single time I've gotten the answer back. Sometimes it's not what I wanted to hear, but they've gotten back to me, and they've gotten back to me in a timely manner. I think that's fantastic.
Well, I appreciate the conversation, and do welcome people to follow me on Twitter. The handle is Drone Laws, and I do respond to direct messages there as I can. So if you have question that comes out of this program, just drop me a line, and happy to try to get you a response.
Well, again, thank you so much. Thank you for the great work that you do. Thank you for being a great advocate, not only for DJI, but for all of us drone hobbyists and professionals out there. We really appreciate that. I want to thank everybody for joining us tonight. And remember, as always, it's a great day to fly. Take care, everybody.